Folks, do you hate snakes? Well, we hate snakes too. And let me tell you, someone else that hates snakes is our good friend, Indiana Jones. Dan and I are both big Indiana Jones fans, as you can guess from all of the other stuff that we like. So, Dan and I just wanted to kind of take some time to explain to you guys our feelings on Indiana Jones. We've got several. It's not just one or two movies we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Indiana Jones just kind of on the aggregate, on the whole. There are a lot of feelings. The first thing that I would just like to say is that I know that Han Solo is where Harrison Ford broke out and made his name and really became a household name. But I feel like if you ask people who Harrison Ford is, I think more people say Indiana Jones than will say Han Solo. And the
Oh
reason
yeah.
that I think that that's the case is because there's just something about the character. He's got a certain level of intelligence, and he's still kind of gruff. He still knows how to get his hands dirty if he has to. He also kind of is just what everybody always wanted to be. I mean, who didn't want to just chase treasure for a living when they were growing up? It's just an amazing thing that we all can think about. It's like Goonies for the adults, right? It's like we
Yeah.
all get to just be treasure chasers for our real career. I think a lot of people probably chose the archaeology path just because of Indiana Jones. And so for me, I feel like Indiana Jones is who Harrison Ford is. When people want to embody Harrison Ford into one character, I think a lot of people might think Jack Ryan. I think a lot of people might think of some others. But for me,
Yeah.
I think of Indiana Jones. Dan, what do you think?
I think if you ask Harrison Ford, he's definitely going to tell you Indiana Jones because I mean he's definitely on record about how much he loves Indiana Jones. He loves playing Indiana Jones. He feels a kinship with that character, and you could tell once Harrison Ford had Indiana Jones, he fell out of love with Han Solo completely. There was a period at which he cared about Han Solo. He liked Han Solo. Uh, you know, I know in Empire Strikes Back is an ad lib because he took his notes and he was into who his character was and he thought that's what Han would say and he worried about that stuff. But once he really had a hit with Indiana Jones, he was lobbying for the death of Han Solo as far back as Return of the Jedi.
hmm
And George just wouldn't let him do it because George is like, it's not that kind of movie, Harrison. That's not
Yeah,
what we're doing. We
yeah.
don't have you know, our main people make it through. We're going to do happily ever after here. That's what this is all about.
Until Force
And
Awakens. Until Force
yeah,
Awakens. You know.
well, that George was gone, and Harrison to
Yeah.
get him to like Harrison had been wanting to kill him for like
Yeah.
30 years by that point, and they're like, "I'll come back if you kill him," and they're like, "Well, he either doesn't come back or we let him die." So that's what they did.
So,
So with that, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we can blame Indy for what happened to Han, but yeah, Indiana Jones is just he's so iconic. It's a delivery, it's a character that you just couldn't see anybody else delivering in quite that way.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's just a perfect symbiosis of character and actor and time, and it really delivers. So yeah, it's a fun history that he does define the the actor is defined by that character, the character is defined by that actor.
Yeah. I do feel like Indiana Jones, just in general, when George kind of set out to do this, he wanted to do kind of a middle of the road adventure film, very generic kind of thing. What could I do to kind of bring a lot of audiences in without having to do a lot of setup, without having it was kind of similar to it was kind of like the American version of James Bond, almost is what it was
Yeah.
like. It was just like you don't have to know a ton of the character's backstory in order to enjoy this story right here, right now. And
Well, yeah, that was
that's kind of what I think he was going for with that. And I don't think it was his intention for Harrison Ford to be playing him into his 80s.
no.
I think it was probably his intention, much like James Bond, for somebody to just keep taking the helm every 10 years or so. And then when that didn't happen, it just became too iconic. He became too good at being Indiana Jones that you couldn't really see anybody else being Indiana Jones.
Right. It was he was famously on vacation with Steven Spielberg, and I think they were in Hawaii or something. Spielberg was trying to figure out what he was going to do next, and he tells Lucas, he goes, I think I want to do a James Bond movie. I want to do James Bond. That was the conversation, and
Mhm.
George was like, I've got something better for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, I've got our James Bond. I've got,
Yeah,
and it was, the action serials that they grew up on. Again,
exactly.
the Adventurer, and how can we crystallize this iconography to make something new and fresh? Big Adventure was gone
Mhm.
at that time, and how everything
Yeah.
was very serious, very dark.
Mhm.
And they brought back high adventure. They brought back old stunts like the truck scene where
Mhm.
he did the whip, and that's an old stagecoach
Yeah.
stunt. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They're bringing in real stunts,
Oh,
so it was a great thing. And so at that time, George sets it going, and then you got this triumvirate. You got George, Stephen, and Harrison creating this thing that they're all attached to, and I think it worked. Like I do think that at the outset, it was an idea that this character could just keep going. We can plug in, we could do different actors, we can change things over time, but it became so intrinsically iconic that you just couldn't do it. And actually, I blame George, or like most people blame George, because from what I understand, they spent 20 years arguing
mhm.
about Indy 4
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
because George wanted to do aliens.
Mhm.
And from all reports, Harrison and Steven had the good sense to say, George, that's stupid. This is not the universe to do aliens.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
archaeology.
Religious
I mean,
artifacts were really the big thing, yeah, that they
yeah.
focused
I
on.
mean, aliens are ancient aliens is really popular now, but we've already got, we've got a vibe here. We've got religious iconography. There's a lot of it out there that we can. And the other thing is, it's not even one religion.
Yeah.
You've got Judeo-Christian iconography, but Temple of Doom, you've got a whole different sect of religion. So the whole
Yeah.
world's religious, supernatural iconography that you could explore. Come on, George, let's not do aliens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because they thought about that, I feel like at this point, we could easily have had 8 or 9 Indiana Jones movies,
Yeah. For
you
sure.
know, and none of them about aliens.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and let's just kind of go back to this, Dan. So, which Indiana Jones movie is your favorite, and why is it Raiders?
well, it's Raiders because it establishes the template so well.
Hmm.
It's got all of the tropes and also the subversions of the tropes piled into one thing. You've got the damsel that's also like the baddest character that you could have,
Uh huh.
Marion Ravenwood. You've got the friends everywhere you go with Sala, your
Hmm.
connections and bringing people in. Uh, you've got a bigger ensemble cast than you do in some of the other films,
Hmm.
and the jokes all land. The action sequences are all perfect,
Hmm.
and you've got a hero that is absolutely 100% over his head
Hmm.
100% of the time, but improvising and doing it well.
Hmm.
He's rising above and getting where he needs to go. And if this movie didn't just crush every single aspect of it, then we don't have
Hmm.
this franchise to talk about.
Yeah, and what I think a lot of people like to pull apart the details of this. The one thing I would say is this was made for such a broad audience that I don't even really mind the little details. Like we always hear about the plot hole, the big plot hole in Raiders that everybody knows about. How did he get in the submarine? I mean, everybody, everybody wants to know, but
Yeah.
it doesn't even matter. Like we're to the point where it doesn't even matter. Okay, especially when you see some of the other stuff that takes place in this series over the years. We're talking time travel. We're talking, the Ark of the Covenant magic. We're talking, Indian magic. We're talking all kinds of stuff that it's just kind of like it was made for such a broad audience. And I think the first time I saw this movie is when I was like, what, 6, 7 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
It's made for me to just watch it wide-eyed when I was 6, 7 years old and just be like, that looks awesome. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what it did. It delivers, and they all delivered that. You know what I mean? When I what my first exposure to Indiana Jones was Temple of Doom when I was maybe about that age, 6, 7 years old, as well. And I feel like that one, just because the story centered around kids and kids were integrally involved in the story. We had Short Round, of course, and then we had
Yeah.
the children of the village that all ended up revolting and all that kind of stuff. That was one of those things that just kind of appealed to me as a kid. It was kind of cool to
Yeah.
see that. There was a very Goonies-esque quality to it, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then and then of course I just feel like over the years, the thing about the original three that I just don't think we get with these modern ones is it just doesn't feel like the buildup has ever been there, because those three came so close together and had a
Yeah.
clearly defined direction. These last two, even Dial of Destiny, which I did enjoy. Okay, Dan and
Yeah.
we did enjoy Dial of Destiny.
Get us.
We are not we're not going to sit here and tell you it's the best of the series. We're not that stupid, but we are going to tell
No.
you that we enjoyed it a lot more than Crystal Skull.
Crystal Skull.
The
Yes.
but even though I enjoyed that movie, the reason that I think that these last two are lacking a little bit is because they don't have the same direction that the other three had, where it was kind of building that story to a level where everybody could kind of enjoy it, and make it so that it kind of kept going that direction, where each individual story was something, but it was also a thing where you didn't really have to look back. These last two have kind of looked back, and that's the reason that I
Yeah.
didn't really care for them. I prefer more of the succinct story here, where I don't have to remember what happened 40 years ago in order to enjoy it. So that's part of it. If I had to rank them, I would rank the first three movies in order, exactly how they were released. Okay, even though that's not chronological order, the order that they were released is exactly how I would do it. I would do Raiders, then I would do Temple of Doom, and then I would do um,
Last
oh
Crusade.
yeah, Last Crusade.
Last Crusade.
Which River Phoenix, R.I.P. Anyway,
Yeah.
young Indiana Jones there, but I really enjoyed those three movies. And then I think I would put Dial of Destiny ahead of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That would be my ranking of
Yeah.
the five. Dan, what would be yours?
Okay. Raiders number one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting Last Crusade number two
Oh,
because I just love Henry Jones Sr., Sean Connery, and Harrison Ford together.
yeah, we
It's
talk
just
about
like
him being
magic.
James Bond, and here you go.
Yeah.
We've got
It,
the James Bond, right?
it
So
it's peanut butter and jelly. It's
that's right.
just amazing.
That's right.
It's just I put it number two because I just love that interaction. The dad that can't impress that I just the whole thing comes together. I did the backstory with River Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
It's all wonderful, but I do believe for me, Temple of Doom is so close.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a close three because
Mm-hmm.
it is more. I'm a little older than you, but still, that movie is more iconic to my childhood than Raiders is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was born in '79. I was young when Temple of Doom came out. Raiders, I was too young for it to really make an impact until I was older.
Mm-hmm.
So my introduction to the character is also Temple of Doom. I love Short Round. That's one of the things I think was a huge missed opportunity at Dial of Destiny is if you're bringing people back, bring back Short Round. He just came back to acting. He just won an Oscar.
Yeah, as a
I
director,
mean,
he won
yeah,
an Oscar. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
I would think that he would be down for a cameo at least.
Yeah,
You know,
and not at Loki. Hmm, you know.
yeah. So anyway, Temple of Doom is I could wax on about uh, the Last Crusade, but Temple of Doom I do believe is underappreciated,
I do,
and
for sure.
one of the reasons I believe it's underappreciated is it's not appreciated by the people who made it.
Hmm.
Uh, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were in a bad place in their lives when they made it.
Hmm.
Uh, they had coming off divorces. It was very dark. So I think they
Now,
look at
correct me
back.
if I'm wrong. That's the first movie chronologically, correct? Is Temple of Doom?
Yes, yes,
That's correct.
that is
Good.
one of the that's
Mhm.
one of the first prequels. It was a
Mhm.
prequel before people knew what a
Mhm.
prequel was.
And what's really interesting is a lot of people don't know that just because, like I said, each story was so succinct and its own little thing, you didn't even really know. It was very much like James Bond. You never knew which one came first, so you never really
Right.
cared which order you watched them in, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's
So,
the great thing about a series that is episodic like
that's right.
this. You can
Mhm.
watch them out of order.
Mhm.
They can be in this order or that order. It doesn't really matter. Stuff is
Mhm.
happening and it's fun. So uh, the fact that it happens before is it's loosely established in like a little bit of dialogue and the
Mhm.
date at the top. It doesn't. You don't waste a bunch of time. It's not like modern prequels where you're stepping all over canon, you're changing history.
Mhm.
These are the adventures of this guy. What order they happen in, you know, we're going to end at a reset. Everything's going to be back to, we're going to go on a grand adventure. When it's all over, he will have either gotten or not gotten some really great artifact, and he's going to be teaching class at the university. You know, that's where we're going to be when it's over. So the order of events really doesn't matter.
Well,
That's what's fun about it.
it's kind of
Uh,
funny because this video game just came out, and that's exactly what I expect from the plot of this video game. And, you're not
right.
going to know where it falls chronologically. You're going to chase after some kind of artifact and some kind of temple type stuff. You're going to have some kind of, and then
Yeah.
eventually you're going to get to the point where he's just back and he's with Marcus at the university, and they're just, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So
The girls have a crush on him when he's teaching the class, and you're good to go. And it's fun that way.
right.
Uh, and so those are my top three. And then I am also going to put Dial of Destiny ahead of Crystal Skull. Dial of Destiny was not a bad movie. I know that people are upset, but here's the thing. Don't be upset at this movie that Indy is not as forefront as he is at the other movies.
He's
That
80,
his
dude. It's like,
Yeah, he's 80. Harrison Ford can't do it anymore,
no,
and it's set at a date where Indiana Jones wouldn't be able to like
that's right.
he's old, man. This is a
Mhm.
movie about him being old.
Yeah.
So you can either watch the movie about him being old and know that that's what it's about. And honestly, I felt like he still did a lot.
Hmm.
I mean, it's established when he's climbing upside the wall, he's old and this hurts and I'm doing it slow,
Hmm.
which was fine, but it's not like he couldn't do anything. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And the fact that he finds himself over his head,
Hmm.
he's supposed to. He's
Yeah.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, for
He's
sure.
never ahead of the curve. He's always reacting. I mean, it's the
Mhm.
best. One of the best lines in Raiders is like,
Making
what are
this
you going
up
to do
as I
now?
go.
I don't know.
Right.
That is Indy. He's always making it up as he goes along. So I don't know. We like that movie, but I think a thing that is wrong with both of those movies that the previous three had, these movies were an homage to an earlier era, even when they came out in the
Mhm.
80s.
Mhm.
Um, they were a tribute to high adventure and the great things that could be accomplished with practical effects,
Mhm.
stunt work,
Mhm.
real people doing real things with real vehicles, crashing them, jumping off of them, real camera work of actual people doing actual things.
The
Uh,
the other thing about these particular movies that I think people could learn from, people forget that Steven Spielberg didn't always have the cachet that he has now. Okay, and Steven Spielberg was one of the best at making a studio not look like a studio, and that's one of the things that I love about these movies is he's got these big elaborate temple things built there that you can never even really tell when it's a studio, and it is a studio, obviously. I mean,
yeah,
they didn't have the budget to actually go and build a cave location somewhere, so it is a studio. But Steven Spielberg is so expert at lighting and placing the camera and making sure the angles are just right so that you can't tell. And that's the thing that you just don't get nowadays. Nowadays, the way I always say it is you can always see the four corners of the room. You always can tell
yeah,
it's a soundstage. And this is studio films used to be a dirty word. It used to be something that nobody wanted to do because it felt cheap. It felt like it wasn't good. Steven Spielberg did such a good job in Raiders of the Lost Ark in particular, that I think it's one of those things that's it you could teach courses just with this film on how to make a studio not look like a studio.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, this is all old school stuff. So by the time you got to Crystal Skull, movies aren't made that way anymore.
No.
You got green screen, visual effects, and
Yeah.
mutt flying through the trees
Hmm.
on a vine with
The
CGI
CGI
monkeys.
ants and it's just
Yeah,
it's not even the same kind of film anymore. You know what I mean? So that's
yeah,
why.
CGI,
Mhm.
and then you got and then you get to Dial of Destiny. You've got your CGI de aging,
Mhm.
which I mean, I felt like they did pretty good with that. It was
That's
done
Disney.
well.
They've done really well with that before. Yeah, sure.
The camera, it was shot in the dark to kind of make it. But
Mhm.
again, that's a level of effects that kind of takes you out of that old school fun romp that you get with the first three movies.
Sure. Mhm.
Practical effects, stuntmen doing stunts, and you got a lot of that in both of those movies. But the other three, that was all you got. That's what this is. What can we do practically, and how can we make that great? I mean, I know there's some stop motion with the minecart chase, but I mean, again, stop motion is old school.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I mean, I think we've had a pretty good discussion here on Indiana Jones. Dan, is there anything else that you wanted to close us out with?
I just want to say all credit to John Williams.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I,
Yeah, whether it's yeah,
what,
Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jaws,
yeah,
he makes
E.T.
it all worthwhile.
Yeah,
Yeah, E.T.
everything John Williams touches, man. Jurassic Park, it all just kind of ends up being something that becomes iconic. The reason a lot of these movies worked is because his score worked, and I think I got to give credit to Spielberg for recognizing, and Lucas. They both recognized right away that you don't do a synth track on movies like this. If you do a synth track on movies like this, it seems cheap, it seems fake, it seems like something that's not going to be. But if you do an orchestral track, it brings everything together and it makes it just perfect. And that's just amazing. I love the fact that they both were able to see that years before it was actually going to be. I mean, and because there's no doubt it took so much more time to do this than it would have to do a synth track.
Yeah,
And so you gotta love the fact that even Lucas, when he was doing Star Wars in its futuristic, said, "No, we're going orchestral." I love that. That's awesome. So,
yeah.
so yeah,
All right,
excellent. I appreciate
all
that,
right.
Dan.
So, yep.
Till next time, those are our thoughts on Indiana Jones. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead and watch our videos. Tell us what you think in the comments. We'll see you next time.